What's up, guys? Welcome back to another ANALYSE Pros. This time we have Rase against BloodyFace. BloodyFace is going to be on the OTK Paladin, as you can see here. Fairly standard deck to what most people are playing right now, with the single True Silver Champion, single Shrinkray, that sort of thing. On Raze's end, though, he's playing a Mech Paladin, which is not a too popular deck right now, but certainly interesting. A few of the NA players already have been playing with this deck, Strife in particular. In this particular matchup, there's potential to get a really big Ziliax to maybe heal out of range of combos if a Holy Wrath has to be used. So something to consider there as well. For mulligans on the Mech Paladin side, its mulligan win rates against Paladin in particular, although that is a bit muddied with other Paladin decks, and the sample size isn't huge either. Well, we can see at the top, Crystology way above all the other cards, and then below that you have Galvanizer, that sort of thing, with quite a bit of a drop-off from Crystology. So Crystology, as is the case in pretty much every matchup, is the main card you want to be looking for. On a Holy Wrath Paladin side, again, Crystology, main card. Not much else is really that appealing. Okay, jumping into it. Galvanizer offered for Rase. Certainly a card you want in a lot of matchups. It was towards the upper end of win rates, although quite a big chunk lower than Crystology. I haven't really played this matchup myself, so Rase probably himself has a better idea on what you want to be looking for. Galvanizer itself is a pretty good card, but it's no Crystology, so Rase decides to throw it away. Again, I'm not entirely sure. I could go either way on this one, whether to keep or to throw it away. On BloodyFace's side, no Crystology offered again. In terms of the other cards, Theckle is okay. Sometimes you want it early in some matchups to get to a high life total, but probably not needed in this one. Subdue is an interesting card in that Rase is going to be building and magnetizing onto a single mech a lot of the time, so it's probably quite a good card if Rase gets a very aggressive start for you not to take a lot of face damage, because your other forms of removal aren't going to be good enough to get through the mech. So keeping Subdue is a reasonable decision, I think. Rase passes turn 1 very quickly, doesn't have Crystology. BloodyFace also no Crystology. There is the option to coin a wild Pyro, and that allows you to value trade into just a Galvanizer if it's available, but if the Galvanizer comes down with any other mechs on top of that, you don't get the trade. So it doesn't seem worth using the coin in this instance. So Crystology drawn for Rase, and he has a bit of a decision whether he wants to play this Glowtron here or wait till he can buff his hand with the Glowstone Technician. I think I would play the Glowtron on this turn. At the very least, it's going to be able to trade into the likely novices or hero powers coming from BloodyFace. So you're going to keep board control going into your Technician turn. So I don't think you want to hold it here, particularly when you don't have a Galvanizer to discount everything. For BloodyFace's turn, he can contest with the Pyromancer, or he could draw a card, or he can even coin Acolyte of Pain if he wishes. In terms of 3 mana plays from Rase, with no Galvanizer, he can't actually trade into this Acolyte very cleanly, unless he has something like Skaterbot and another way to buff this card, which seems fairly unreasonable. So there is a potential here to go for the coin Acolyte if you want to draw some extra cards. And now Raze's hand is very awkward. This Acolyte's likely going to be drawing 2 at the very least. For Raze's turn, things are getting a bit awkward. We look in the hand for our upcoming plays. We haven't got even a turn 4 right now. It's just this Prismatic Lens And when we have all of our expensive stuff in hand already, pretty much, the prismatic lens is a bit rubbish, to be honest, because we're lacking tempo, so it's not really a great turn 4 play, to be honest. Beyond that, we're looking like maybe a galvanizer at some point, and then we're dropping a 2/7 egg and maybe a skater bot as well, and it's like it's really slow. So in terms of hand quality, we're really very slow on this immediate turn as well. There's no way to one-shot this acolyte. Galvanizer would look really great on this hand, not to be too results oriented. Again, I'm not too well versed on Mech Paladin whether this sort of situation happens a lot and that you really need the Galvanizer for it to make your curve way better, because we do run a bunch of 5-cost cards, which makes things real awkward. So Rase here pushes the face damage, which is a little bit interesting. What happens if you trade here? This becomes a 1/1, and it likely trades back here. And then if you draw any magnetizing stuff, you can freely push face. Like if you were to draw, say, the Divine Shield Annoyer module, you can just magnetize onto this and push face damage and not worry about this acolyte pain anymore, clogging up the board for things like Subdue or Shrinkray in the future. You really don't want to be facing a wide board from BloodyFace, because that means he doesn't have to combo any of his removals. He can just play a Shrinkray onto board and trade, which is really bad for you. Downside is you miss 2 face damage here if you do this trade, and you also draw them an extra card earlier, so they have a higher chance of having a good turn 3, which is also a downside. If you were to do this trade, and this trade happens afterwards, you have a 2/3, and then say BloodyFace has a mediocre turn of like playing a hero power or a novice, which is somewhat likely. Not great turn 3s available usually for paladins. So the board will end up probably looking something like this, with these 2 minions dead, and you have a 2/3, and the opponent will be on 30 instead of 28, and they'd also have an extra card initially, which is certainly a downside. You might draw them towards their better plays. But if you were to top deck something good here, say like a Snip Snap, Bronze Gatekeeper, or Annoyer module, you can just magnetize onto your guy and push face damage. And at the very least, this is going to be on 6 health, which is the minimum from a Snip Snap, but everything else makes it really, really strong. And then you're not vulnerable to any of the good turn 4 plays in terms of removal from the Paladin. Something like a True Silver is not going to be able to get through this. So you're going to be fine in that aspect. And then you'll be rolling off towards your turn 5 stuff. So you'll always keep tempo that way. The downside, again, of not doing this trade is Subdue is quite good. You know there's a kept card. This is your only mech on board, and you've used your skater bot as well. You have no small mechs to put onto board next turn. So if a Subdue happens on the following turn and the opponent has a 1/2 acolyte after they subdue and you have no mechs anymore, you can't magnetize anymore. If you were to top deck something like an Annoyer module and you play it as a 2/4 Annoyer module, then your opponent can just trade into it and like True Silver it, which is super bad for you again. So even your best draws become a lot weaker against a Subdue, and your opponent has got a kept card which wasn't Christology. And in terms of kept cards that aren't Christology and Paladin, you could maybe even narrow it solely down to a Subdue here. There's really not going to be much else that BloodyFace is going to be wanting to keep in this matchup. Even if your opponent doesn't want to Subdue, because you're going to be magnetizing things in the future, so using Subdue here feels somewhat a bit like a waste, even though it is quite good. It might get better in the future. The problem is that you're leaving BloodyFace with this acolyte on board. So if you were to like magnetize onto this card on the next turn, and the opponent has maybe even 2 minions because they do this trade and they play a 1/1, and suddenly the Subdue becomes even stronger because maybe he'll get a triple trade out of his acolyte, which is very scary for you. Going face is great, but you also want to kind of keep the Paladin's board a little bit under control because of Shrinkray and Subdue. See what BloodyFace goes for. Declines on the Subdue. Wants to save it for a bigger mech, which is reasonable here. And Rase does top deck the Annoy module, and it's a little bit awkward on this turn. Like if you just Annoy module your guy and go face, then and Subdue happens on this, and then this trade happens, and then this value trade happens, you're like shockingly far behind. And the BloodyFace just has so much time because you have no mechs on board. This acolyte's value trade so doesn't get 3 draws out of it, and things are looking a little bit awkward for you, I would say. And I think it would kind of put ourselves in the situation by not taking the trade on the acolyte while it was good, because we really, if we want to do this trade now, like we could do this trade now and then play the Annoy module or something, but then we're just kind of missing face damage because we could have pushed 4 this turn by magnetizing. So the 2 we pushed earlier isn't really saving if we're going to have to trade this turn. So yeah, Razor just goes all in, and it opens up a very, very tasty Subdue for BloodyFace on this turn. He could even use the Pyro on this turn as well if he wants to push 1 face damage. Although that's not really necessary, I would say. BloodyFace decides not to use the Subdue, which is interesting, I guess. Cycling the same. It does open up this Faceless manipulator, actually. So I think maybe this is a bit too greedy, actually, from BloodyFace. Yeah, I get you want to use Subdue on a really big target from Rase, but I think this is big enough. There's been no Galvanizer played. There's no Glowstone just yet. You have a really good opportunity here to just kind of out-tempo and go for a bunch of card draw. And then by the time you do need to go for a clear, you'll have already drawn one by then, I think. Whether it be a Shrinkray or a Quality, I think you'll have more than enough time to find it. You're not going to be in danger of dying, I don't think. By not doing the Subdue this turn, you've opened up a potential for just a Faceless manipulator for quite a bit of tempo on Raze's side. Skipping ahead and just looking at the board tape, this minion does have Rush, so there is just potential here for a Faceless manipulator to come down this turn. It's absolutely fine, and killing off this 3-1 and then pushing 4 face damage, and then this 4-6 is actually really quite annoying for BloodyFace to deal with in the future turns. He might have to end up using a Subdue anyway if he wants to start dealing with the board, and then it's kind of restricted by mana. He's got all his card draw things still in hand, and it's just not, it's not a very clean route where we had, I think, a very fine play which kind of blocked a lot of what Rase wanted to do. I think you can just Subdue on this minion, trade here, and then play the Bloodmace Falnos, and that's completely fine. You end up with a somewhat big hand size, but you might be able to dump some cards. The Thanos is probably not going to die, and you have potential to even use a Consecration next turn if you want to use it to help clean up some of the upcoming board. If not, you can just dump some other cards. Right now you have 8 cards in hand, and if you play Subdue and Thanos, you'll go down to 6, but then you'll draw a card off the Acolyte to go to 7, and then you have 2 potential ways to draw cards just on board next turn, and you get the natural draw, so you can maybe even go up to 10 potentially on the following turn, and you have other ways to draw cards in hand. So maybe you're a bit worried about hand size a little bit, but I think you should be fine. You've got ways to dump your hand in hand. You've got this Pyro you can just play if need be, so it's not going to be too much of an issue, I don't think. But in terms of card draw, this is way faster cycling through your deck and dealing with Raze's upcoming turns. Like if you delete this card, Rase just has no tempo plays. Like maybe his best thing is to drop like a Glowstone on the next turn, and you have probably a pretty good idea. He hasn't got great tempo plays. He's not played a Galvanizer. He's used 2 of his 1-drops already to make this minion. And he didn't play anything on 3 either. Like, he would probably play like the Gatekeeper if he had it on 3, or a Snip Snap on 3 if he had it. He played the Annoy module off the top last turn. It's possible he has another in hand, but you might have some inkling that a lot of these cards cost 5 mana. And with 2 Faceless Manipulators in the deck, it's certainly possible for Faceless to come down next turn, and it is quite a big punish, I would say, in terms of tempo. It lets Rase push the initiative back against you and say you have to deal with this board. Whereas if you do this play, Rase kind of has to start building a board and you don't have to deal with it on the next turn. You can just keep going with your card draw strategy and you're bound to find an answer to a huge board. And that huge board from Rase is probably not going to come for a long time, I would say. So yeah, on this turn, I think I'd just like to see a Faceless and a Subdue come down. You even have the potential to heal up your Acolyte if you want to get super greedy with draws, but you'll likely suffer a bit from hand size in that case. Now, using the Pyro to proc on the Acolyte, you get a draw 1 turn faster, essentially, but the Acolyte is always going to draw 2 from just doing a value trade anyway. On Raze's turn, you know, Glowstone is nice when you have got a big hand size, but I think here, just a simple Faceless Manipulator onto this card. You know there's cards like Subdue left, and you know there's Shrinkray available for BloodyFace, and if you keep, you know, going forward, something like Equality as well is going to be a problem. So you don't want to get super greedy with these Faceless Manipulator, and I think it's just good here. You get to push the 4 face, you get to kill the Acolyte because this thing has Rush, so you end up with a 4-3 and a 4-6, and then you're not weak to things like True Silver. For 5 mana for BloodyFace, I mean, the best thing you can really do is Hammer of Wrath your 4-3 or something, and then you're still pushing another 4 damage to face on the following turn. You have potential to even magnetize onto it, or play this Glowstone, and things are looking quite nice for you when we had an awkward start. So I think a Faceless Manipulator this turn is pretty good. There's also the option to just go for like a Mechano Egg, but the Mechano Egg is a lot slower in terms of aggression. You're not pushing as much face damage in order to, you know, stop you from dying to AoEs and stuff. I think it's better to be aggressive first when the AoEs aren't going to happen, and then drop the Mechano Eggs on the turns where BloodyFace wants to Equality, for example. I think you'll do a bit better in that scenario. There's obviously the chance you can go Mechano Egg onto the board, magnetize your Mechano Egg, and then like Faceless it, and that looks pretty promising going forward. But I think it's quite slow. It lets BloodyFace do a lot of things. Rase goes for the Glowstone, which is something you want to be doing as deck on 5 a lot of the time. The problem I have with it is your hand is real garbage slow. You can only play 1 of these minions every turn. You don't push any damage here. You open your minion up to things like True Silver Champion is a big one to be able to kill this card, or a Hammer of Wrath as well. All ways to kill this mech. And you're taking this trade as well, so you're missing 4 face damage on this turn initially anyway. And you might not have a mech available to magnetize, so you might be missing extra face damage on the following turn regardless. And in terms of tempo, you're not going to be able to drop you're not really going to be dropping like one of these every turn. It's just so slow. It's better to just go Faceless here, I think, and save Glowstone for when you find cheaper cards to buff, because doing something like Glowstone plus a 1-drop on turn 6 is fine for tempo, but doing just a Glowstone into a 5-drop float some mana, into a 5-drop float a lot of mana, just seems super slow, and you're not really putting as much pressure on the Paladin as you would like to have to make them use their AoEs, so they can't just draw their deck and go to the end and go for like Zephyrus Master Spell on your board or something, or Zephyrus Frost Nova into just kill you with the Chavala combo. So for Paladin's turn, BloodyFace, I would say, kind of allowed Rase to take a turn like this based on his previous play. He's kind of put on the back foot where he wouldn't really be in this spot, because there would be a slow turn from Rase and he'd have some minions left on board. Looking at this 3 health on this minion, Conk and Thalnos in the future is a potential if this card doesn't get magnetized. But given it's the only mech on board, it's quite a likely case that it will be. So BloodyFace draws Christology here, and there's certainly an argument, and I think probably it might even be correct to use the Christology here to overdraw, because the cards you're going to get from it are Kangor and Elven Archer, which don't help you cycle at all, and your health total is fine at this point, so you don't really need a Kangor, to be honest. And Elven Archer, again, is very expendable, so I kind of like just using the mana here to use the Christology and just overdraw one of the cards, and then maybe even play the other one and not go for overdraws in the future. And it's just going to help you speed up your card draw, I would say, and lets you play some of these other card draws you have in hand, like Thanos and Flash of Light, and not be worried about overdrawing Zephyrus or a Baleful Banker, for example, because they're very important cards. I think the Kangors and the Elven Archer at this point, you really don't need to play them. You'd almost rather them not be in hand, because you don't want your hand clogged up anyway. This is a spot where you probably want to just overdraw with the Christology and then go from there. I get like in Hearthstone you don't really want to overdraw all the time, but it's context dependent. This is a deck you want to cycle towards your combo essentially, so overdrawing is absolutely fine, I think, when the cards that you're overdrawing really don't matter. And BloodyFace agrees, which I really like to see. Smart play from him. I think that's a spot where like Twitch chat would be like lolling at you because you overdrew, but I think it's a smart overdraw. For Rase's turn, he only has one mech available. He kind of wants to push face damage as well, but then you don't really want to leave the Kangors alive, because the worry is all the face damage you push is nullified anyway. You don't really want to use a Ziliax either, because that is a potential route to victory later on, so that's probably not going to come down. It's probably something like an egg this turn. Seems entirely reasonable. But again, we're going real slow and letting BloodyFace kind of do his thing and not have to worry about face damage at this point. So for BloodyFace, I think it's a fine turn to use a Consecration here. It's not an amazing card in the matchup, and it gets pretty good value here. You can just Thanos Consecrate to delete both of these and still have this one run around to push a little bit of chip damage. And the chip damage is relevant, because if you can get him down to 25, you might put Rase in a spot where he's forced to use the Ziliax prematurely because he's worried about dying to just the initial 25 burst damage. So doing a little bit of chip damage here towards Rase is beneficial. So if things had gone a different way this turn with this Christology draw from Rase, this would actually be a pretty decent turn to do like a Glowstone Technician, because you have these cheaper cards available now in your hand, which means, you know, the Glowstone is actually an actual tempo tool. It might even be better on this turn than going for an egg strategy, is to go for buffing this guy straight away to do face damage with the War Gear, because if a Subdue comes down, you can just pop the egg for an A8 on the next turn. You're still pushing damage, and you plop the other egg on board, and then you've still got a threatening board. In terms of removal, there's really Subdue, and there's, you know, Equality. Equality is not good enough on the egg because it's got high attack. If they Equality it, you're going to still have an A8 behind it, so you're still putting a lot of pressure on. What could happen if you War Gear hit? One, you push quite a bit of face damage this turn, which is great. And two, you make them use either Subdue or the Shrinkray, or put them in a spot where they have to take a bunch of face damage again if they don't want to use those. And if they leave up this minion, then you can like Faceless it, which is a lot of power onto the board again. Well, in the knowledge that it's very likely to get subdued, but if it gets subdued, you can just follow up the next turn with your other egg, and then trade into one of these 1/1s potentially, with your 1/1 egg here, and then put a threatening board out again. So it looks like Rase is going for a strategy of trying to make a board that isn't completely weak to some of the AoEs from BloodyFace. Kind of the problem is, really, as soon as these cards start getting big, BloodyFace can just Shrinkray them and not clear them, and these eggs don't actually get popped. It's only really Equality that has to kill these eggs. So in terms of pressure, you're not really actually putting BloodyFace into a lot of it, really. You're going to be left with a board of 1/1s, most likely in the future, and BloodyFace doesn't actually have to clear it. Now you do want to get raised below that 25 point. You do have the Consecration to do that at some point. You could do it here if you want. It's not a great use of it, but you want to get the cards out of your hand. You want to do a bit of face damage anyway. So for Rase, he is on 21 now, so in the future, he has to be a bit worried about using the Celiax to hit him above 25 at some point. But given the Celiax is buffed by 5, that's probably going to happen at some point. In terms of stopping this chip damage coming from BloodyFace, using one of your Bronze Keepers on the egg should be enough to do it. If a Shrinkray comes down, BloodyFace likely doesn't want to pop open these eggs straight away anyway. So they're not going to Shrinkray your egg down to a 1/1, trade your egg, and then push 1 face damage. It's not going to happen. They're just going to probably double trade into your guys and then Shrinkray to leave you with no targets to pop the eggs. So on this turn, I think it's pretty reasonable to Bronze Keeper one of your guys and then War Gear the other one, just to split your threats up a bit against just a Subdue. There are 10 cards left in deck, 9 on the next turn. So BloodyFace can't go for a Zephyrus yet that often, and he might not have drawn his Shrinkray at this point as well. So this is quite a good turn to put some buffs on your guys and push a bit of face damage to make BloodyFace have to respond to it. Going for Faceless Manipulator this turn is reasonable as well. You push a little bit less initial face damage, but against a Shrinkray, you have this War Gear to buff up some of your guys afterwards, which is beneficial. But I think against a Shrinkray, you're probably fine just using the Celiax against it, and you'll be more than okay pushing that sort of damage. If the Shrinkray has come down on the immediate next turn, just Celiax your guy, and Bronze Keeper another one, and I think you're fine. I don't think you want to hold Celiax till the very late stages of the game, because then BloodyFace is just going to be able to have Zephyrus available for it. So this plays a little bit better around an immediate Shrinkray, but BloodyFace might just decline to Shrinkray this board. You know, and the longer you hold off against OTK Paladin, the more freedom they have to use their timeouts. You really want to make them use their timeouts early, because it doesn't matter how big your board gets later on if they can just negate all the damage with a timeout and then just go for a full clear late afterwards. You really need to put on the pressure at all stages throughout the game and not backload it towards the end of the match, because it's not going to be able to get you across the finish line if you do that. So BloodyFace here has got a full hand and not a lot of cards he really wants to be playing. So it doesn't want to commit the Shrinkray, and instead just goes for a Subdue to reduce a little bit of damage, which seems reasonable in this spot. And then Rase is left kind of in a similar spot to last turn, where if he loads up onto the board, then he can't deal with a Shrinkray. So what does he do? He's holding this War Gear to play around the Shrinkray when I don't think you need to do it. I think you instead should just force them to have to use a Shrinkray before Zephyrus comes along, because if Zephyrus Master Spell comes along later on, or timeouts come down, or, you know, Zephyrus for lethal with your Chavala, you start getting into a lot of problems. I think here it's completely reasonable to go for just the War Gear on this turn to force out a Shrinkray from the opponent. You can even put the Prismatic Lens in with your remaining 4 mana this turn, so it seems really clean, to be honest. I'd like to put on the pressure on BloodyFace and make them have to use their cards. And we have other ways to buff in hand. We have the Scalebot, we have Ziliax, we have Bronze Gatekeeper, which is plenty of ways to add attack power to the board if we do get Shrinkray afterwards. So we go for the lens here. I don't think it's like necessary. I think we put on way more pressure if we just go for the war gear. Doing this kind of chip damage thing, we do put BloodyFace in a bit of an awkward spot where he doesn't really want to Shrinkray this, but if he doesn't, he will just die, essentially. So he might be in a spot where you have to like use the Shrinkray anyway, which is, I guess, a win for us, because then we can war gear onto it, or he has to time out instead. BloodyFace's Christology doesn't draw any cards at this point. So in terms of cycle for the rest of the deck, there isn't really much there, to be honest. And because of that, BloodyFace does decide to go for the Holy Wrath. And now Zephyrus is active, which is interesting. So for Rase here, we need to consider how do we not kill BloodyFace on the next turn. There's Chavala available, which potentially can kill one of our guys, and then maybe a Shrinkray were to come down as well to reduce the attack power of the board. We want to be able to have a lot of attack buffs against that. Against just a Shrinkray, we want to have enough ways to buff in hand to push the damage. So if we just leave the board as it is, we'd have 3 1-attack guys on board, and then in hand we have a 5 here, a 5 here, a 1 here, 2 here, 2 here, which is repeatable. So in terms of doing the 16, we need to put some additional minions onto the board and or reduce the cost of the things in hand to be able to deliver the lethal against just a Shrinkray. In terms of BloodyFace dealing with this board, there isn't really great ways. The best way you can is going like Pyro EQ plus a timeout to stop the A8s killing him, and then go for something like Zephyrus plus Twisting Nether on the last turn, and then we'll end up with no board because of the not having death rattles. There's potential to play around that with the Snip Snap. If we get Pyro EQ timed out, we can, you know, load the board with Snip Snaps, and then if a Nether were to come down on the turn afterwards, we'd end up with a bunch of 1/1s available to push face damage with them. Other than that, it's probably likely that BloodyFace is just not going to be clearing this board. Instead, he's going to be looking to just neuter the damage for the most part via Shrinkray or via Master Spell from a Zephyrus. And we want to try and play best around those as we can. So given that fringe out of Pyro EQ timeout into Nether, we want to ideally avoid playing the Snip Snap if we can, but still play around some of those other cards. A fine play this turn would be to go, you know, Galvanizer to reduce the hand cost, and then 2 Snip Snap bodies of 2/3s here. So you'd end up with like a 1/2 for this board and 2 2/3s. So against like a Shrinkray, you'd still have 6 power on board. You'd have these 5 cost guys reduced to 4 mana. This would be 0 mana. So you've got, you know, 11 burst from here available, and that'll be enough to get you over the line against this 16 health. It's worth noting that this Call to Adventure always gets a Galvanizer on this turn. So in terms of developing board with buffs in hand and making buffs cheap so you can follow up on them on the next turn against Shrinkray or Master Spell, it might be a good idea to just go for double Galvanizer this turn. Play this Galvanizer with 1/2. Obviously draw a Call to Adventure as well, and then you play the other Galvanizer as a 3/4. And then you end up with a 1 cost Snip Snap. These both cost 3. This costs 0, and this costs 2. So on the following turn, you have 5, 5, 1, It's 6 mana still, and you can go either double Snip Snap or Annoy Module Snip Snap for another 4 damage. And on this board against a Master Spell, you'd have a 1/2, a 1/2. These would all be zeros. And you'd probably have an extra 1/1 because you'd hero power on this turn with your remaining mana. So you'd have 3 attack power on the board plus the 15 in hand, which is more than enough to get you across the 16 threshold against just a Master Spell. Against a Shrinkray, similar sort of thing. Against Chavala Shrinkray, you're probably not going to be able to deliver lethal on the following turn, but you'll be able to clean up the Chavala and develop on other stuff onto the board using maybe your Ziliax and the Snip Snaps. And you should have enough of a board to threaten lethal in the future. So yeah, this turn Rase goes for the Annoy module for Magnetize, which really doesn't make sense in the context of what we're playing around. It'd even be better to play the Annoy module not Magnetize in this spot because we're playing specifically around Shrinkray and Master Spell. But I think the Galvanizer is just a better play overall. If we were to get something like Pyro EQ timeout, we'd just load up the board with Snip Snaps, so we'd have something against the Twisting Nether as well. But yeah, Magnetizing here really doesn't do anything at all. You're not isolating a Divine Shield taunt to play around Chavala heals because these 2 taunts are available, so it doesn't make sense at all here. And you want to just reduce all your buffs in hand because these stats on board, they don't matter. BloodyFace is either going to time out or he's going to get rid of the stats via Shrinkray or Master Spell. Ends up with a hand that should be cheaper than it is, and it really costs him. He also loses out on a buff from hand. Even if he were to not Magnetize here and just have an extra 2 attack minion on board, I think that would have been enough to get him across the finish line as well. You see BloodyFace does go for the Master Spell here. It feels like he can't afford to use a timeout here because he's going to need it in the future to be able to win this game. Maybe he was looking for a Frost Nova this turn instead, I'm not sure. Just the 2 power on board, plus only these 3 guys you can play. This is going to be 11, 13 damage, so you're going to be 1 off lethal here, which really, really sucks, which we could have easily prevented. Even just not Magnetizing on the previous turn would have given us lethal against this play from BloodyFace. Instead, Rase pushes nearly lethal damage. And he puts Divine Shield Taunt in the way, so a Chavala would need a bit extra to be able to heal for BloodyFace. There is a Pyro still available, so it's not like the hardest thing in the world to get rid of this Divine Shield. There is a True Silver, by the way, in Rase's deck, so BloodyFace does want to try and heal a little bit here. Just so he's not dead to that. And the Chavala heal should be enough. So here, Rase makes a critical mistake, which ends up costing him the game. But it's a very easy mistake to make, and playing around what happens is very complicated and perhaps not intuitive. We have to recognize in this spot that in terms of damage available for BloodyFace, he has 1 Holy Wrath, he has Hammer of Wrath, and he has a True Silver left available. And in terms of board clears, there's nothing left available. The only ways to clear stuff on board are the Chavalas and the damage sources we just mentioned. Because of this, and the fact that we know there's a 50-50 chance in deck for there to be Chavala at the bottom of the deck, so a Holy Wrath doesn't have to be activated via a Baleful Banker, there's a way we can play around what ends up happening in this game. What ends up happening is, because of this prismatic lens, BloodyFace gets to Holy Wrath face and draw both Chavalas on board and then kill off this thing without Rase being able to heal from it. Because we recognize that Chavala is the only clearing tool available, what we should do this turn is use the Skaterbot on this egg to make it 15 health, and that way 2 Chavalas won't clear it. We can use these 1/1s to clear off this Baleful Banker, so the Baleful Banker can't help in clearing it either. And what does that mean going forward? It means that BloodyFace can't immediately clear this off with 2 Chavalas, which is what he ends up doing this game. So what happens if this ends up being on 15 health and these minions die? Well, we know there's a timeout still in BloodyFace's deck, and in terms of damage sources, he's got 25 from the Wrath, and he's got 4 times 2 from the True Silver, and he's got 3 from the Hammer. That's it. And he can't let this heal from the Wrath at all, and he has to stop himself from dying. So 2 Chavalas do need to be able to kill this egg, because we're going to be on 30 here. So being on 30 life here, it's 25 from the Holy Wrath. We need to have either both True Silver swings hit face, True Silver plus the Hammer of Wrath hit face, or some combination of them plus a board sticking for us to lose this game. So how does BloodyFace go about doing that? Well, if this is on 15 health, BloodyFace could take a turn to go timeout plus True Silver swing into this. We don't get any extra heal from it or anything. We're still on 30. It wouldn't heal us anyway because we're immune. And then on the following turn afterwards, BloodyFace does his combo with the Holy Wrath. He plays Chavala, bankers it, Holy Wraths, and then the 2 Chavalas will kill this. And then he'll send 4 face from the True Silver, looking to kill with the Hammer of Wrath on the following turn. And while he's doing this, he's going to heal to 13 from the initial True Silver swing, and we're not pushing any face damage here. And then another 2 to 15, and then the 2 Chavalas he's going to heal up to 29. And on board, we're going to have whatever we play here, which is on the following turn, which could even be if it's a Faceless manipulator, which we still have in deck, there's 0 chance that BloodyFace wins because he can't get through both of the eggs. But if it's not, we might be able to put enough pressure on the board to do 29 back to him. So BloodyFace will go up to 29 and we'll be on 1 health. And our opponent's going to have no cards in deck, so they're going to take 1 fatigue from natural and 2 fatigue from playing the Hammer of Wrath. So we have to do 26 damage back to them. For cards left in the deck, we have 2 Blessing of Wisdoms, 1 Call to Adventure, 1 True Silver Champion, 1 Face Manipulator, and 1 War Gear. So Blessing of Wisdom, obviously a dead draw on the next turn, but Face Manipulator outright wins us the game on the following turn if we're able to copy this egg. Call to Adventure also has a chance to win us the game because it might find our Face Manipulator, which will be on the egg. We won't be able to attack with Blessing of Wisdom because the opponent will have timed out. So remember, we need 26 to draw the game because the opponent, when they Hammer of Wrath, they will die themselves. But we need 28 damage to win the game, whereby the opponent will die to their fatigue damage before they can use the Hammer of Wrath. If we hit a War Gear on the next turn, we would end up playing these 2 cards and the hero power, and keep the war gear in hand for just charge damage essentially. Because we'll be against timeouts, there's no point playing it initially. And would have these things would be dead. We'd have 3, 3, 1 from our hero power. And then we've got 2 here, and this will be an 8/8 because the Chavalas will kill it. So this totals 17 damage, and then we get 7 extra from the war gear, and that will total 24. And we also have a true silver in deck, so there's a chance we can draw that as well, and that'll give us our 28. There's also 2 blessing and wisdoms, so one of them can be used to give us a chance to find that true silver. And that gives us 28 damage required. A lot of numbers here. I'm a little bit confused myself. I really don't expect Rase to work this out within his turn, but it's interesting to break down the numbers and see where we land. But the important thing to know from this is that the Chavalas are the only real things that can kill this egg. And if we put it to 15, it means that BloodyFace is going to have to invest his true silver swing into this egg instead. So on this turn we should be making this 15 life, and it's going to delay BloodyFace by a whole turn, so we can't initially use the Chavalas to just kill this. And that is going to give us a window of opportunity to find a Faceless manipulator to use on this, or to find the required amount of damage via a war gear on a true silver champion to be able to counter lethal BloodyFace. I hope some of that made sense. It was a bit confusing. I'm a little bit confused still, to be honest. But let's see what ends up happening and how it plays out. So yeah, last card is Chavala, and with this prismatic lens costing 3, it allows BloodyFace to Holy Wrath the face, play the Chavala, banker the Chavala for 7 mana, and then draw his last Chavala with the prismatic lens and play that as well, and use both the Divine Shield Chavalas to kill this egg. So he didn't have this 3 mana prismatic lens, which is not always going to happen, and Rase probably doesn't know this because this High Priest hasn't been played yet either. Could he still win this game? So he could spend the turn developing True Silver and the timeout so he doesn't die. And then the next turn when he has Chavala in hand, providing that Rase doesn't hit a Faceless manipulator for this, and he doesn't buff it out of range via a war gear, we can go Chavala, banker, Holy Wrath face for 25, use both the Chavalas to kill off this egg, and then push face with our weapon, setting up the lethal with the Hammer of Wrath on the following turn, and you should be fine. So yeah, as it worked out, the prismatic lens let BloodyFace speed up his strategy by a whole turn, and it gave you less outs to find like your Faceless or your war gear or whatever. But if we made this 15 health, we wouldn't give him that opportunity, and he'd have to spend a turn swinging his weapon into this egg and timeouting, and then it would give you some more outs to counter lethal your opponent, and it'll give you an extra turn to find the Faceless manipulator for this egg. Can't blame Rase too much for this one. I mean, it's a weird line of thinking. It's a weird route to take, but he could have recognized here that the only way to kill this egg was really the Chavalas, and putting on 15 health instead of 14 is actually a huge breakpoint. Again, it's a bit too much to consider in a game. I had to really sit down and break this down. Now for BloodyFace, I mean, he could still take a turn off going for the True Silver, but there's no real need to, because he can, with the discount in Prismatic Lens, he can kill off the egg immediately and just speed up his process by a whole turn. Yeah, no way to counter lethal Rase. He would have hit War Gear here, which was one of the outs we were talking about. As it stands here, got to try and survive, but I think he knows there's a True Silver and a Hammer of Wrath on the other end. Yeah, BloodyFace just about squeezes across the finish line, almost dying on so many turns. Just about finding his way through. I think there are a few things Rase could have maybe done this game which would have improved his chances of winning. But overall, a very close game. And hats off to BloodyFace. He navigated some of those turns very well. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. I'll be back with more of this next week. See you later.